Titans are now on the clock, and all their attention has been on the Miami quarterback Cam Ward. There have been teams that have made inquiries about coming up to number one in recent weeks, and the Titans have not engaged for one quarterback Thursday night. That would mean the Cleveland Browns then would be on the clock, and the signs point to Travis Hunter, and the estimates of some, the best player in this draft, going number 2 to Cleveland. When you hear the general number 3, the New York Giants, lots of questions about whether they would go to Shedeur Sanders, but I think most people suspect that Abdul Carter would be the potential pick here for the New York Giants. Don't think Shedeur Sanders can be ruled out of this conversation, but it certainly sounds like it's tracking more towards Abdul Carter at this point in time. The Giants have done a ton of work on Shedeur Sanders. There's not a team in the league that has spent more time around Shedeur Sanders than the Giants. And that will continue to be, until Thursday night, the main question about whether they shift off the draft and go from one of the top prospects in Abdul Carter to one of the top quarterback prospects in Shedeur Sanders. Nobody's ruling it out, but it certainly seems like Abdul Carter would be the logical pick right now.
Yeah, and if they don't go Shedeur Sanders, then it makes you say, who is getting Shedeur Sanders? The Giants' only top 3 pick over the last 40 years, Saquon Barkley in 2018, by the way. Now, the Giants' defense would benefit greatly from them taking Abdul Carter at number 3. Last season, Carter had 61 quarterback pressures, second most in the FBS. The Giants ranked 25th in the NFL in QB pressures and lost more games than any other season in 100 years as a franchise. Head coach Brian Daboll spoke today on the draft plan in New York.
I really appreciate our process. Having done this a long time in a very variety of places, I appreciate our process, our communication, the scouts' communication, the coaches' communication. And once we come up with who we're taking, regardless of when that is, there's an agreement on all parties. And, we look forward to bringing that player, whoever that player may be, into our building and try to help develop them.
All right, look who else here. We got Dan Orlovsky, Jason McCourty, as well as Mina Kimes. Dan, is Carter the right play there for the Giants?
He's a tremendous player. I mean, if you look at defensive pressure of college football last year, who had the most against Ohio State? Abdul Carter. Most against Oregon? Abdul Carter. Most against Notre Dame? Abdul Carter. The reality is this. Joe Schoen, the general manager of the Giants, who's been there since 2022, 60% of his picks have been on defensive players. That's the most out of any general manager in all of football. So we're just going to continue to add to that. And while some of those picks have and some of those picks haven't panned out, and he's a tremendous player, the situation for Brian Daboll, who's the head coach who we just heard from, and Joe Schoen, it's as bad a situation as there is in the NFL quarterback head coach combination or head coach GM combination. It's because football people do what's best for the team. That's just how they're brought up in nature. And I would assume that they want to do that. But then there's the reality of job. Like, there's the reality that they have to find a way to save their job. And I just haven't seen a ton of examples in the league where jobs get saved from a defensive end. It's just not how it often goes in the NFL. And so while I agree that's probably the best player, quarterback is appealing. You just wish they were better ones early on in this draft.
Yeah, there's a tension there that Dan just outlined between what might be best for the people running the Giants and what's best for the Giants. And from my standpoint, what's best for the Giants is taking Abdul Carter, one of the 2 best players in this draft. There's 3 players who I think are a cut above Carter, Hunter, and Genty. And while Carter doesn't necessarily align with their greatest needs because they already have good edge rushers, having a top edge rusher on a rookie contract is such a bargain these days when edge rushers are making quarterback money. It gives you flexibility moving forward. Kayvon Thibodeau is going to be up for his contract soon. Allows them some flexibility if they don't want to pay him, for example. It also gives them an identity. I mean, good gracious, guys. Abdul Carter, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence. This team will be one of the best pass rushing teams in the NFL. I truly believe that if they take Carter. So as much as it doesn't necessarily align with the timeline of the GM or even the greatest needs of the teams, he is the best player available, and I think they have to go with that.
Yeah, man, you're absolutely right. When you talk about a guy being arguably the best player in the draft and you get a chance to get him third overall, you have to jump at that. And you already put up the stat that they were 25th in quarterback pressures. When you add a guy like this that can change the game and be just as dynamic as the guy on the other side, it's a nightmare for the offense. And Dan, no, I know exactly what you're saying, because for this team, you have to find a quarterback of the future. And I look less about when they get the guy and more about the conviction of who that guy is. Brian Dable talked about it, how well they work as a group. You have to figure out whether that is Jackson Dart, is it Tyler Shuck, is it Jalen Milroe, is it Shedeur Sanders, because I think knowing who that guy is different. Like Sean Payton last year, they identified Bo Nix as their guy. It didn't matter when they got him in the first round. They got the guy that they wanted. I equate it to marriage. It doesn't matter the origin story when you've been married for 40 years,
Sure.
whether you met on Christian Mingle or the VIP of the club. If that's the person that is meant for you, the marriage works and there's going to be a ton of success.
All right, so I like the analogy. Here's the pushback to it. So Mina's point of one of the best pass rushing defenses in the NFL, probably fair. Russell Wilson, Jameis, who's going to be the starter. Hopefully they can play good football. This team's got to play the Packers. They got to play the Chiefs. They got to play the Broncos. They got to play the
Schedule's
Chargers.
rough.
So, and everybody's schedule is rough in the NFL. The point is, if you haven't improved the defense and specifically rush, and Russell plays well, what does that get you if you're Dable and Shane? It probably flirts with 500. Does that save your job? I don't know. Does that get you high enough in next year's draft to get a quarterback? Probably not. At some point, you got to swing, and hopefully it hits.
And the issue is, to your point, though, is Shedeur that guy at 3? Because if he is, then to your point, like, you don't think twice. You go and get him.
I don't know if I would sit here and pound the table. Shedeur's the guy at 3. I do think that later on in that first round, a Jalen Milroe, a Jackson Dart, that feels a little bit more comfortable than Shedeur at 3.
You also wonder if somebody could fall to them when they've got picks in the second round and beyond. But again, they'd have to be in love with that player, to J-Mac's analogy. Adam, you've heard what everyone's saying here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. You mentioned a player falling, Laura, and the Giants are scheduled to have the second pick in the second round on Friday night, pick number 34. And it's possible with the quarterbacks in this draft that we may have quarterbacks, very likely we'll have quarterbacks sliding into the second round. So the Giants could opt to wait. They could opt to trade up. But this really has been going on for quite some time, because if we go back a year ago, the New York Giants actively were trying to trade up to the number 3 spot to see if there was a way to go get Drake May, and they could not get a deal done with the New England Patriots. Well, this year, there wasn't a team that was any more engaged in calling the Tennessee Titans and trying to see if they could get up to number 1 to go get Cam Ward. And the Giants couldn't get up to number 1. And so here they are again at number 3, because they won a game late in the season against the Indianapolis Colts, who were fighting for their playoff life. And they lost to the Giants when the Giants had the number 1. Lost that game, they'd be sitting there here with the number 1 pick. All these conversations about what to do at 3, Abdul Carter, Shedeur Sanders, where do you get a quarterback, would be moot. They would be taking Cam Ward. It would be an entirely different draft. But here we are again with the Giants now at number 3, the position they were trying to get to last year when they couldn't get up that high. And they're here in a year where the quarterback class is not regarded as strong as other years.
Yeah, it's just incredible context. And in case you missed it there, Adam talked about the fact that the Giants attempted to trade up to that number 1 spot. Back on NFL Live, Adam Schefter's here. Some top stories brought to you by Sleep Number. Adam, some contract news coming in today. Let's start in New York with the Jets.
The new Jets general manager, Darren Muji, said today that he does plan to pick up the 5th-year contract options on 3 former first-round draft picks from 2022. Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, Jermaine Johnson. No surprise, all have played well. The Jets would like to retain all 3, and the picking up the option is just the start of contract extension talks with all the players. Meanwhile, the Philadelphia Eagles reached agreement today on a 4-year, $68 million extension with the successor to Jason Kelce. Pro Bowl center Cam Jurgens ties him up contractually to Philadelphia through the 2029 season. No team's been more aggressive about locking up its offensive line long-term than the Eagles.
Yeah, that's how you win Super Bowls, right? Adam, let's talk about the Saints a little bit. They have the 9th and 40th overall picks. What are you hearing about the QB plans in New Orleans?
Everybody's waiting to see what the Saints do in round one at number 9. And again, they